On today's Locked On Jayhawks, the biggest things KU football still needs to accomplish in the offseason and the top 5 reasons Kansas basketball has issues right now.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's up? I'm Derek Johnson. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page, where you can like and subscribe to the show. Thank you to the everydayers catching each and every show. And on today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, we're going to be talking of things that KU football still needs to accomplish this offseason. And, obviously they've already gotten quick starts with some of the coaching hires, but still plenty more to be done. So we're getting into that. Also, KU basketball. Top 5 reasons that they have issues right now, top 5 reasons that they might be struggling right now, and we'll try to figure out if those things are long-term issues, plus some latest news, a couple more KU football players entering the transfer portal. So we'll get into all that on today's episode, which is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, where you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com, and you can get started today. Let's start with KU football here. What do they still need to accomplish in this offseason? So they made the coordinator, changes, promotions, combination of all of those. As of right now, you look at the rest of the coaching hires that need to be made. They do need to go out and get a tight ends coach because that's what Jeff Grimes was coaching. I don't know if they're going to look for somebody who can do tight ends and special teams. They've kind of been divvying up the special teams stuff. But outside of that, so far all the position coaches are the same. Now, there was a little bit of movement later in the game last year. We'll see if there's any movement this year. Obviously, Lance Leipold loves having consistency and keeping things similar there. So just the big one would be adding a tight end coach. If you could add somebody who's good on the recruiting trail, that would be certainly a bonus. The big one, though, in this offseason is hitting the transfer portal hard for KU. And they've already been able to land a couple transfer portal players. LaShawn Williams, the transfer running back from Iowa, could come in and end up being Kansas's starting running back and might be 1,000-yard rush or something like that. Then again, it could be, somebody that you already had back, like a Harry Stewart or, I don't know, Johnny Thompson or something like that on your roster. But you added a running back there. You added a linebacker in season with Bengali Kamara. We can't forget about that one. And that was a nice addition for you. Former Pitt Panther, went to South Carolina, transfers over, and he gives you a nice head start on the linebacking core, a linebacking core that needs some reconstruction after losing some players and after certainly having some pitfalls in it this past season, even regardless of having some talent like Cornell Wheeler and J.B. Brown. So you got to hit the transfer portal hard. And specifically, if we're talking about where do you need to most hit the transfer portal hard? Well, I think when you look at the quarterback position, now that Jalon Daniels is back in tow, I don't think that's a position you really touch. Jalon, Cole Ballard, Isaiah Marshall, David McComb, feel good about those top 4. Mikey Pauly and Ben Easters just for more quarterback competition. Like if those are your 5th and 6th, cool. So you don't need anything there. Running back, LaShawn Williams, Harry Stewart, Johnny Thompson, probably your top 3. It wouldn't hurt to add another running back there because that is a lot of young, unproven talent at the running back spot. And after Savion Morrison left, maybe you add somebody. But, to what level? Do you add a Dylan McDuffie type who you figure can come in and just be a veteran in that room? Or do you add someone who you think can make an impact? I think if they do add someone, and which of those types of players they add is going to be really telling about how they feel about some of the young guys and where they're at this point in time, but you probably could use one there. The biggest positions that you need, though, it's receiver and linebacker. We mentioned Kamara already coming aboard, but right now you look at that linebacker 2 deep, and, it's a lot of guys who are unproven, right? Tristan Fletcher is a redshirt senior. We haven't really seen him on the field. Jason Gilliam, kind of that linebacker hawk role, he's had to deal with injuries throughout his career. Logan Brantley was dealing with injuries this past year and has been young and kind of unproven. Jonathan Kamara, Ja'Cory Stewart, both guys that, the staff was high on when you brought them in out of high school, redshirted this past season, but are they going to be ready to go as redshirt freshmen? And then Malachi Curvey, another highly rated recruit for you that you brought in, but is he going to be ready to go as a true freshman? So there's a lot of questions about that linebacker position. You need to bring in maybe 2 linebackers, and maybe both of them need to be starting level linebackers. At the very least, you need to be bringing in 1 starting level linebacker into this unit. At the receiver position, it's kind of the same thing. I actually feel like Doug Emelian's going to be a solid receiver for you. I think the flashes, we more so saw it in 2023. We didn't see him play a ton in 2024. I think in Jim Zabrowski's offense, though, maybe you get a little bit more receiver rotation than we saw with Jeff Grimes. So it's going to be important to build up that depth a little bit more. But the flashes we saw in 2023, I actually liked some of the stuff from Doug Emelian. So I feel good about him being one of the starters. Who are going to be the other starters? Because right now you have Keaton Kubeka, who's redshirt sophomore. He was dealing with some injury stuff this year. He will be a redshirt sophomore, I should say. And the staff seems high on him, but we haven't really seen anything proven. And then you have a bunch of freshmen, right? Is it Jaden Nickens, Tate Nagy, Bryson Hayes, Jackson Cook? You have a redshirt sophomore and a walk-on and Bryce Colhoun. You're going to need to add at least one starting receiver in the portal. You're probably going to have to add two receivers in the portal together. Ideally, both of them would be starting level good, and maybe you even end up having to add three receivers in the portal. The good news, because you have Jalen Daniels back, I would think it's going to be more alluring to receivers in the portal to be like, I can go there and put up numbers. Obviously, nowadays, the most important thing that you consistently hear in recruiting portal is going to be money. It's going to be the NIL game. But if all things are equal or if things are very close, it does go to those other factors that we were so used to in recruiting, and having that good quarterback like Jalen Daniels, having an offensive coordinator that you can point to and say, look at the game he called and look what the receivers did in that game, in the bowl game against UNLV. And they can be like, oh, that might be interesting to me, right? So those are the two main positions you really need to go after. Tight end wouldn't hurt to add one there. You look at Deshaun Hanukkah coming back, but he's coming back off a really bad injury. And then it's like, we haven't heard a ton about Jaden Ham or Carson Brune. Leighton Cure, I think, will be in the rotation, a linebacker, but you probably need another one to add there. Offensive line, especially after Logan Brown leaves, you need some more offensive line help. I feel good about Kobe Baines. I feel good about Calvin Clements with another offseason under his belt. If you get Bryce Foster back, I feel good about 3 or 5 starting offensive linemen. And, maybe a guy like Nolan Gorchika in his final season, or I don't know, maybe like James Livingston takes a leap or something like that, to where one of these guys takes a step forward to where you feel really good about your 4th lineman or your 5th. But you realistically want to have 8 linemen you feel really good about. And you could definitely add some more depth. You could definitely add a starter level player to that offensive line. Defensive line, probably need a defensive end, specifically a strong side defensive end. That's certainly going to be the big one that I'm looking at there. Defensive tackle, you're probably set. I mean, Withers, Dunn, Caldwell, Harold, who really showed up this year, adding Keys to the fold. You still have Calvin, and then you're adding Josiah Hammond. You might actually be okay at defensive tackle. And then you look at the secondary. Yeah, maybe it makes sense to add a starting level corner because it felt like they were high on Demarius McGee coming into the year, but that kind of faded. We did get to see Jalen Todd late, and I'm excited to see what he can do next year. I'm excited to see if Jameel Croft can get more run, or if like Andre Gibson, Austin Alexander can get more run, Jacoby Davis. But might help to add like one veteran to that unit who could either be the first, second, or third corner, right? Depending on what you're kind of looking for there. Safety, kind of same thing. Like maybe you add one veteran to the fold, but you do at least have enough depth and rotation there. But those are the two big ones. Linebacker and receiver specifically, you have to harp on. And if you are budgeting out your NIL dollars, which you have to kind of do here, and you're going, hey, where are we going to allocate? Because it's not just, right, the staff likes to allocate, okay, we have this many scholarships we're giving to this position, this many scholarships to that position. And maybe it gets flexible. It's like, oh, well, all of a sudden we hit our allotment of this scholarship player, but now this stud player wants to join us, like we'll make room for it, right? You adjust and you work on it. But you have to do that with NIL too, right? Let's say you have a $5 million budget. I have no idea. And let's say you are going out there and you're going, okay, so we're recruiting these players, where do we want to budget the most money? You probably right now are saying receiver and linebacker. You're probably saying like, let's spend a little bit extra and get that premium linebacker, even if it means we're going to be able to spend a little bit less on, another running back, for instance, right? I think that would certainly make the most sense for KU. And then the last one here over the offseason is just that offseason progression from your young guys, from the players that you've recruited over these last couple of seasons, players that are going to be asked to play bigger roles. We've seen players take steps up over time of development. I look at like Dean Miller. I look at, DJ Withers and Tommy Dunn and Blake Harrell as guys that have progressed on the defensive side of the football internally in the system and have earned more playing time. Taylor Davis, Mason Ellis, I think would apply for that too. I look to the offensive side of the ball, and it feels like Nolan Gorchika kind of had a nice jump last year, right? Like, what will that lead to this year? We'll see. But you've seen some development. Can you get more development? That goes for the weight training, that goes for conditioning, that goes for being healthy, that goes for the mental acumen. That it just goes to everything about rounding yourself out as the best football players and best football team you possibly can be. And so, like, can you get a jump from Calvin Clements in the offseason? Can you get a jump from a Keaton Kubeka in an offseason? Because at the end of the day, good programs, consistent winning programs that consistently go to bowl games year in and year out, they don't always have everything set up every single year to have star seasons. But what they do is when they lose a good player, they might not have as good of a player. They might lose a player to the NFL. The next guy coming in might not be NFL good, but usually they're at least serviceable enough to give you a fraction of what they were providing. And in some cases, you're able to internally develop even better options than the players you originally lost without having to go outside. And, we've seen a little bit about that over the last 2 years, but now that it's been, this will be year 5 in the Lance Leipold era, it really starts to become about that development and those cycles kind of running through. All right, let's continue on. Top 5 reasons, switching over to KU basketball. KU Hoops has some issues right now, and how many of them are long-term concerns? This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com. You can join today. You get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to everydayers tuning in to each and every show, and check out Locked On College Football, Locked On College Basketball for your second listen every day. Our top 5 reasons the Kansas basketball has issues right now. Obviously, still 7-2, still has some really good wins, still can figure this thing out in a real way. But we saw a lot of concerns this past week with 2 road losses, both by, well, I guess ended up being single digits against Missouri, but felt like 2 double-digit losses, that's for sure. Okay, number 5, the free throw disparity. This one is lower on the list because, part of it could just be weird sample size stuff early in the season. Kansas shoots a lot of shots at the rim, so you would think in theory they're going to start getting fouled more. But right now, Kansas is in the first percentile, the one percentile, if that was a word, for free throw attempt rate, meaning they are at the bottom of the entire country in free throw attempt rate. They're averaging just north of 13 free throw attempts per game. Meanwhile, opponents are taking 20 free throw attempts per game. And on top of it, Kansas is only hitting 71% of their free throws. Opponents are hitting 74%. So that basically means, on average, Kansas is spotting their opponents around 4 points per game on free throws. That is a problem if you go into every game and you're automatically down 4-0 just from the free throw line. And again, that doesn't even include you think of free throw shooting as just the points it creates and the opportunities it allows the offense to score without having to score in a half-court setting. Those are all true, but it's also the idea that it puts your players in foul trouble, right? It can be the difference of somebody playing, 20 minutes as opposed to playing 30, or somebody playing 10 minutes as opposed to playing 15. Like that foul trouble that creates with it. Or, if you are putting a guy in foul trouble, it could be the difference in them, not defending you as hard next time because they can't risk getting another foul. So it's also the foul trouble it creates. Is this something about just how Kansas is playing offense? Because they've taken a lot of layups. They've taken a lot of shots at the rim. So, again, that kind of weirds me out. They're why are they not getting more free throws? Are they taking too many shots, even if they are around the rim, where it's just not leading to free throws in some way? I don't know. Is it just a bad whistle? Is it refs straight up? I mean, if you were an official and you did not give Hunter Dickinson the benefit of the doubt, I could kind of understand why that would happen. So is that part of it? I don't know. Is it the KU has done a bad job not staying vertical on the defensive end of the ball, and that they're being too aggressive, they're getting reachy a little bit, and they're fouling too much? or being a little bit undisciplined on the defensive end. I don't know. Maybe it's a combination of a lot of those things, but that is number 5 on the worry list. Number 4 is an Achilles heel on the defensive end of the court. So this one's not higher up because it is kind of matchup dependent. And you actually look at, like Bart Torvik and Ken Palm, Kansas still is a top 10 defense nationally. Now, both those do factor in preseason expectations, past history, stuff like that. I know for Ken Palm, it like filters out a majority of the past seasons of the preseason expectations by the time we get to like the end of January or something like that. So it's still factored in there, but still, like, overall, the numbers are actually okay on the defense, but there have been too many times, whether it's a stretch in a game, whether it's a half, whether it's, the extension of a game, where the defense has had issues. And again, it is a matchup thing. Like, you look at when Kansas is playing Michigan State, it's not a problem. You look at when Kansas was playing Duke, it honestly wasn't that much of a problem because, right now Cooper Flagg's not knocking down a ton of threes. So realistically, they kind of felt like you're able to put KJ Adams on Cooper Flagg, which is a fine matchup for you. And Hunter Dickinson against their centers, like their centers aren't really shooting a lot of threes. So like that actually is an okay matchup for you. But you look at some of the matchups where teams can put you in more ball screens, where teams can spread you out more from three. You look at the second half against North Carolina. You look at really these past two games. I mean, Creighton just bombs away from three. There was obviously the stretch where you went on the 15-0 run where Missouri just couldn't score. But like outside of that, Missouri offense was pretty efficient in the game overall. And so it's that Achilles heel that not everything is wrong with this defense. But when you play a team who can spread you out, who can put you in a lot of pick and rolls, has dynamic players who can, basically create their own shot and score off the dribble and can space you out and shoot threes, like any of those things can be problematic for KU. So, and I think also like it also leads to, if you can't stay in front of the ball, it leads to more situations where you're like scrambling, right? And then you end up fouling the opponent more, which kind of ties in to what was number 5 on our list. All right, into the top 3. Number 3 on the list is the lack of 3-point shooting. The percentage has been okay for KU. It's at 34.6%. I was hoping it would be closer to like 36%, but still it's better than where it was a season ago. It's at least like fine, right? But the real issue for me here is the lack of volume. Kansas ranks 321st in the country in 3-point attempt rate. That is actually a higher rate than it was last season. Kansas was 334th in 2023 to 2024. The 2 previous seasons before last year, they were barely inside the top 300. So I'm starting to have like worries. Is Bill Self's offense aging a little bit like John Calipari's was at Kentucky, where it started getting stale and it felt like it wasn't happening, versus like a Roy Williams offense, which didn't feel like it aged negatively? Then again, Self is still so good with that, those like out of timeout plays and stuff, that maybe that's not a concern. But is that style of play where in today's day and age where you're just not going to shoot a lot of threes, is that just like not really something that you can get away with in today's day and age? And then, right now teams are condensing the floor. They're taking away Hunter Dickinson as an offensive option. So you look at that and it kind of becomes dependent on guys to make threes from the outside and space the floor. But if you're not shooting the threes, then it's like they're just going to stay condensed on the court. They're going to be like, okay, so what? Even if you have a game where you shoot 38% from three, where you shoot 40% from three, you only took 18 of them, you took 20 of them, you made 8 of them. Like, that's a really good game for you. You went 8 of 20, 40%. Like, that's going to help you win, but that's not going to like guarantee you a win, versus like when you play Creighton and they're hitting like 14 threes, you're going to lose that game, So I would like to see that number go up. Is that doable though? When you're playing a lineup with DeJuan Harris, KJ Adams, Hunter Dickinson for so many minutes a game, and combined, that's going to launch up those 3 players, 3, maybe 4 3-pointers in a game. So it just becomes hard to get them up from everywhere else. I don't know what the answer is. That one is one that I have a very long-term concern about, not just this year, but just like in general with the way the game is going. Number 2 is not getting enough from the transfers. Zeke Mayo is shooting 31% from 3 right now. He's been the most promising, I would say, consistently of the transfers for KU. I think he's been pretty solid so far, but that's a number where you expect it to be higher. Maybe that's a good sign, because you expect it to be higher and maybe there's a big reversion coming. David Coit has been, I would say, he has shown a lot of really good flashes. We've seen some good, like the Missouri game was really good for him. A couple of the early season games were really good for him, but then we've seen other games where it's like 0 points on 0 of 4 or something like that. So like he's just been a little inconsistent, but I don't know that you were asking for more than that coming into the season. Maybe now you've been put in a situation where you need more than that, but I don't think that was the goal coming into the year. Then there's the whole Shaq Moore situation where it's like, okay, all of a sudden he's hurt. Is he playing? Is he not playing? And that just seems to be like a mess. Like, what's going on there? And, I thought coming into the year, if you would have told me 15.9 points per game was the number that you would get from AJ Storr this season, I'd be like, okay, that sounds about right. Like, I could see anywhere in that, I don't know, 13 to 16, 17 point per game range. Like, sure, 15.9 points per game for AJ Storr. Instead of, and that's what AJ Storr's averaging, 15.9 points per game is the combination of AJ Storr and Ryland Griffin. Obviously hasn't been up to par of what you've been kind of expecting or maybe what you paid for at the NIL game. And it's been a super inconsistent game to game. I think that's the big thing right there. It's just been inconsistent where you've had some games where it's just like, a non-factor from one or both of those players. Other games where maybe they've played well. Plus both guys have, I think, had what I would call defensive struggles at different points throughout the season or game to game. I will say, you might be surprised to learn and I was surprised looking at this because clearly it seems like Bill Self, they're all, I don't know that I would call they're in the doghouse. Maybe they are. They're not getting like an insane amount of playing time. It feels like they're playing so poorly that you would expect the numbers to be like Nick Timberlake-ish. They're shooting 43% from the floor combined, which is like, it's fine. That's average, whatever. 36% from three, which is like above average, and 80% on free throws. So like, that's not even like that bad. Point being, like, I don't know. Maybe partial part of this problem is that it's a little bit on Bill Self to play them through the mistakes a little bit more, which brings us into number one, which is it just seems like a lack of chemistry and roster design flaws. I think you can relate that to like bad body language. We saw that a lot in the Missouri game. Guys not knowing their roles, still learning to play with each other, for each other, what role exactly they're going to be on the team, playing at a high intensity level, like those things we haven't seen so far. And, this is obviously a risk in general when you go heavy portal from a year-to-year basis. Like that is one risk. You're going to have some years where it all clicks. You're going to have other years where that type of thing can happen. And then when you have the players with big NIL paydays struggle, like, I don't know that that's going to be great for the locker room either. Certainly it's not from external views of things too. And then I think it's kind of compounded in Bill Self's system. Like I think for Bill Self, his best rosters are ones where he sticks with guys and develops them for 2-3 years down the road. And then if you want to go out and add that transfer to be the final piece or to be the extra depth piece off the bench, and you want to add that McDonald's All-American again to be that, one McDonald's All-American in the starting lineup, like those things work. But when you have a bunch of newcomers, and I get it, they do have like 3 starters back from last year's team, but think about it. The players they were asking before the season started to be the best players on the team, you could argue, or at least the best scorers from the outside, all are transfers with Storr, Mayo, and Griffin, right? And so you are counting on these guys in a real way. And you look at the full rotation, and it's mostly newcomers. And for Bill Self, it's been tougher for him to adjust to those things quickly. I just wonder if it's a design flaw in terms of what best suits what Bill Self has been best at. And like, again, I've brought this up before, but, it's easy to see, okay, let's make the short-sided move. We're going to go for the All-American big man and Hunter Dickinson, and that's going to cause Ernest Uday and Zuby Ejiofor to leave. And now you see Zuby Ejiofor developed, and he goes for 28 and 13 against K-State. Uday's been fine, but, a good defender. And I don't know where they'd be. Like, clearly probably you still trust Hunter more offensively than both those two guys, but like, would you be much better defensively? Where would the rest of the NIL funds go for that? Like, would you be better off at other positions? I don't have the answer to that, but like, I do wonder if that is just a kind of design flaw in how they've gone about this. And if they're going too hard in the portal for a coach that, maybe that's not the best way for his success in terms of what has gone well for him. But, he is the Hall of Fame basketball coach. He is an unbelievable basketball coach. I still think he's the best basketball coach in college basketball right now. So I guess who am I to judge? All right, let's finish up here. A little KU football news, couple more players into the portal. This episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by Omaha Steaks. perfect for a late Christmas gift. And nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. It's guaranteed perfection in every single bite, and right now you can save on unforgettable gifts with 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, score an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience. And the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages featuring gourmet favorites. From legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide for a limited time at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com, OMAHA steaks.com, and an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. Minimum purchase may apply. Finishing things up, and we will have a KU football transfer portal offer roundup, a target roundup on our next episode. We'll also have later this week KU NC State preview for you, so make sure you're subscribed to our show anywhere you get your podcast. A couple transfers exiting in addition to the ones that have already left. Jared Sample, receiver for KU, has entered the portal, and the class they brought in a couple years ago, they had 3 receivers, Saraz Buncombe, who transferred to, was it like Central Arkansas or something? It was I believe it was a non-FBS school. He didn't really do much there in the first year. Now Sample transfers. Quebeco, we haven't really seen much, though. It seems like the staff was by far prioritizing him among those 3 in the class to this point based on what they had seen. Not great early returns so far from what you've been able to bring in from the high school level at the receiver position in the Leipold era. So we'll see if that changes this year because you're bringing in, several of them and having to supplant it with some portal players in the receiver room as well. But he enters the portal. And then Harrison Utley enters the portal. Interior offensive lineman. This is one I was bummed about because it seemed like a really good get when you got him. Kid from Norman, Oklahoma. You were able to get him out of the area. He committed to KU. Then he later, after he committed to KU, got an offer from the hometown school in Oklahoma. Decided to shun that off and decided to stick with KU. Now, was it a situation where he came to Kansas, and maybe that's the case for Sample too, and they were put in a situation where they're like, yeah, I don't know if I'm as good as these other guys. Like I'm pretty far down the depth chart. Maybe I should transfer somewhere else. That's entirely possible. But I definitely thought Utley would have profiled into being maybe a future center for KU. And you look at it, even if Bryce Foster does come back, Dre Dorian can come back. Like both those guys would be redshirt seniors. So then you're looking at it and you're like, okay, well, who would be the starting center for the following season in 2026? And, I thought Utley might have a chance at that, but I don't know. Maybe he was never that high up in terms of, where the staff viewed him after his first year in Lawrence. That'll do, though, for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. Back for a KU offer roundup episode tomorrow, right here on LOJ.